Today I have some budget-friendly fall decor DIYs that you will absolutely love. Welcome to the Chic Show. Project number 1 are some faux ceramic pumpkins. I have various pumpkins from Dollar Tree and Walmart that I'm going to be using today, and I have previously painted them, but we're going to redo them and give them an upgrade today. So I'm going to give a couple of them a coat of sandstone by Waverly, and then a couple of them will get the moss color by Waverly. I started with the sandstone and I gave them one coat of the sandstone paint, and then once that was dry I came back and gave it a second coat. And while that second coat is drying, I gave it a sprinkle of some cornstarch. I will let this completely dry before I do anything further to it. Once the pumpkins are dry, I went back with just a chip brush and brushed off any of the excess cornstarch. I repeated this process with the other pumpkins as well. And also a little tip here is I put the cornstarch in a salt shaker, and that made it a lot easier to sprinkle around. Once everything had dried and the excess cornstarch had been removed, I gave them a spray of hairspray just to keep that cornstarch from coming off further. Project number 2 is a grapevine pumpkin, which I found at a local thrift store. Started by removing the embellishments that were already on the pumpkin. I then decided to use one of these drawer pulls from Dollar Tree as the stem. I tightened it up and then I placed it in the middle of the pumpkin. Lastly, I secured the stem with some hot glue and added some burlap leaves. Project number 3 is a fall scroll. Began by using this apple cider piece from Dollar Tree. I gave it one coat of Waverly ink chalk paint. So for this piece, I'm going to be using one of these piano rolls. So I'm just going to kind of measure about the size that I want it. I'm going to cut it down and decoupage or Mod Podge it onto the sign. Once I had it cut to size, I went ahead and creased it along the edges so I would know where to cut when the time came. I applied a generous coat of Mod Podge onto the sign and let it completely dry. Once it had dried, I'm using this piece of Teflon paper and my little mini iron there to iron the music roll onto the sign. It will reactivate that Mod Podge and there will be no wrinkles. Once it had cooled, I used my craft knife to remove the excess paper. I used scissors to cut off the excess on the side and then used my finger sander to sand off the excess paper. Now I've printed out my phrase that I want to be on here, so I'm going to be using the carbon paper and I'm simply going to trace it with a pen and then go over it again with a paint pen. To embellish the top of the sign a bit, I'm using some of these burlap flowers and leaves. I really love the vintage look to this sign, and this is one of my favorite Robert Frost quotes ever. If you're still with me, leave a fall leaf emoji in the comment section. Project number 4 is an absolute experiment. Because I am a budget-friendly DIYer, I wanted to try to make my own milk paint. So I Googled some recipes and I kind of combined them and made up my own all at the same time. So I'm using a couple of tablespoons of powdered milk, followed by about a quarter teaspoon of pickling lime, which I did order on Amazon. I then added a couple of tablespoons of water. It was not enough, so I did have to continue to add some till I got the consistency I was looking for. I also added some antique white paint to the mixture as well. I then let this mixture sit for a few minutes. I'm going to be using these two wood utensils from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to give them a stain using Waverly Antique Wax. I did this on all sides of the utensils. Once it was dry, I did go back with some Crackle medium and gave the front and back a coat. I let this dry for just a couple of minutes and then I painted on my homemade milk paint. Now, the coverage is not really thick at first, but I think that's pretty normal for any milk paint, and I really liked the way it was looking. The Crackle medium worked well, and then I took my finger sander and went back and sanded over various spots. I'm not sure how I feel about this homemade milk paint, but I tell you what, it did have very good adhesion. It was really hard to sand it off of those utensils. I did also seal the pieces with some DIY Big Top. Next, I wanted to embellish these pieces a little bit, so I used some jute twine and I used some hot glue to help adhere the jute twine at the bottom and the top, and I just wound the jute twine around the handle most of the way up. Once I had both of the handles wrapped, I used some sprigs of floral and tied those onto the handles. I also added some jute twine to hang the pieces from the top. I think this is a great addition to a kitchen in the fall or even the spring. If you have your own recipe for homemade milk paint, please leave it in the comments below. I would love to try it. Project number 5 is a thrifted wood wall pocket. It appears this was handmade, and it looks like it was for a notepad and a pencil. I did get it for $1.99 at Goodwill. The paint that was on the front, part of it looked like it was puff paint. It was very difficult to remove, so I had to put some citrus strip on it and let it sit overnight, and then I was able to scrape most of it away. So I'm going to be giving the entire piece a coat of Waverly ink chalk paint. Next, I'm going to be using some of IOD's new Holly Glen Christmas transfers. To me, these pieces will work great for fall. Some of them will even work for spring as well as Christmas. If you're reluctant to spend the money on the IOD transfers, look for something like this that you know you can use for more than one season. So I chose the 2 raccoons, and I placed them on the front of the wall pocket, and then using the scraper, I just scraped it on and removed the backing, and I think it looks lovely. The last thing I did was use my finger sander, and I sanded over everything just to give it more of a rustic look and help it to look like it had been there forever. I also sanded around the edges of the wall pocket. Once this was done, I did give it a coat of DIY Big Top. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.